Welcome to Shine Today, and a very special episode as well, a fascinating conversation to have today, and I'm so glad you could join us because we are joined by Dr. Chris Galloway, senior researcher from Massey University and an expert in AI. Dr. Galloway, welcome.
Thank you very much. I have to start off by saying I'm not a data scientist like the guys who develop AI systems, but I am someone who is seriously interested in AI or artificial intelligence, what that is doing in our society, in our economy to transform the way that we understand our society and our economy, and where all of that might head.
Yeah, well, I mean, why don't we talk about that then to begin with? So I'm going to run some names past you. HAL, Skynet, I Am Robot. These are all pictures of AI that we get from the movies, right? So how closely does that compare to the state of AI in our current culture?
Can I sum that up by saying not at all?
A lot of people are relieved right now, so thank you.
Yes, no, pleasure. AI really is when systems, computer systems, are used to simulate human intelligence through coding that tells the systems to do certain things. And of course, some of them can learn as they go along and do other things. What we tend to see is a lot of implementations of AI that are increasingly entering our daily lives. In our pockets, we carry around a phone. Used to be, I mean, I didn't get into photography because I wasn't into the infinite detail of organising f-stops and other things that the photographic guys would get into. Today, we just point and shoot because AI in our phones will do the calculations for us as to how to optimise the photo that we're wanting to take. And even if we later on want to beautify the phone that we've taken, just press the button and the system will do it for us. That's a sort of common everyday experience. But we also see, for example, in the University of Auckland, a startup that's come out of that called Toku Eyes, has developed a system whereby they can take a photo of a diabetic patient's retina and within 10 seconds, using an AI-driven system, determine whether that person has any other health risks.
Wow.
They've also got a new product that says we can use AI to determine your actual age, your biological age, rather than your chronological age. I said to them, can I be a test subject? And they said, everybody says that. But these are sort of everyday examples.
Right.
What I'm interested in doing, and those I work with are interested in doing, is saying, well, these are great in and of themselves, but what are the benefits? What are the potential risks? And can we step back a little bit and look at the impact this is not only having right now, but what it might have in the future? Are we seriously going to be worried about the robots taking over?
Yeah.
And
well, I think before we get to that point, there's a few hurdles that we're probably going to cross on the way. You're probably familiar with the presidential candidacy of a guy called Andrew Yang in the US. If not, I'll fill you in a little bit on this one because he had a whole campaign that was built around the rise of AI and how that was going to affect their economy. And he brought attention to, self-driving cars are coming and this is going to take away jobs and what's this going to mean for us? And are we looking at a great realigning of where we're developing, sending our skilled people and that sort of thing? Is that the kind of thing we're looking at here? How this is going to shape how we're working and what our culture looks like?
yes, but now when it comes to self-driving cars, it's an interesting example because companies have been working on that for years.
Right.
But my understanding of the current state of play is that while self-driving cars can be a great thing for those who are into just sitting back and letting the car make the decisions, there's still a need for human input because the systems that make the car go are not as good as human beings at the nuances, if I can call them that, of driving.
Sure.
When something sudden happens in front of you or to one side of you, there's still a need for a human to play a part in determining which path or which road the car takes. And that's really the current state of a lot of these systems. There is still a need for human involvement. So we're not yet at the point, and it's a highly debatable one, where we can just sit back and let the technology do everything for us.
Well, because that's the thing, right? The picture of man and machine, I suppose, has been this, again, a narrative that maybe films have shaped our thinking
Yes.
of quite a lot as well. But in terms of how AI could complement, I suppose, the decision making or the operations of day to day, is that a more realistic picture then of what we're looking at?
I believe it is. I was tempted to say, I'm glad you asked that question.
Yeah.
Because there's kind of two views of not only the present but also the future of AI. One says there's going to be a point where we're going to reach what some people call the singularity, which is where artificial intelligence and all that it empowers takes over, and effectively we serve it, not the other way around. What I'm a fan of, and again those that I spend time with, is the idea of augmented or extended intelligence, where we are using artificially intelligent systems, enhanced intelligence, to complement human capabilities. Like the example I gave before about the self-driving car that still on occasion needs some sort of human touch to be involved. So rather than taking over, complementing what we as human beings are able to do and able to think.
So then what are the risks as you see them in terms of this? I know some go to that more fantastical, dystopian future kind of idea, but do you see any other maybe more realistic challenges that we need to be aware of with this rise of AI, and how much more, it's probably more of a part of our lives right now than we even think, right?
I suggest that it is. Everything from our individual privacy and surveillance, we're becoming more and more a surveillance society. I've seen that happen overseas.
Yeah.
Where you get facial recognition systems, as I understand, are widely deployed in China, and in other more authoritarian regimes, we see the power of AI being used in a particular way for a particular purpose. So there are risks around surveillance, for example, in the use of our data that is being collected not only through our phones but also through the computers that we use and other technologies. AI is very good at collecting that data and assessing it, but then we need to think about, well, to what use is this being put? Are we moving towards a situation where our societies are more authoritarian because the technology enables that to happen?
And I think some people have wondered as well about, say, what sovereignty they have over their own information as well, right? And how much that might be affected by some of these things.
The important thing for us here in Aotearoa is the fact that the government has put certain safeguards in place. Now, we may have our views on what the government does or does not do, but one thing that it has put in place is an AI charter for the public service. So there are some guidelines around ethics and how the technologies should be used already established. There is also a thing called the AI Forum that brings together businesses involved in AI with researchers and people from government, so there is a good sort of cross-disciplinary conversation happening. For example, very soon there's going to be a forum in Taranaki on how AI can assist environmentally focused activities happening in that part of the world. So there's some good things happening that tend to mitigate some of the risks that we could be worried about otherwise.
Well, we have seen a kind of a strange, I don't know how to describe it, a change in, say, the roles that, say, even private companies can have, even compared to governments, right? In this regard, people would be concerned about, say, like your Googles and Facebooks and things like that, getting to the point where they could rival governments anyway in terms of their power or influence. Are we doing enough in that respect to maybe mitigate those risks, or do we see a future where maybe we have to think about that private-public partnership on a whole another level again?
I think the question of are we doing enough is one for which there's never going to be an answer yes.
Yeah.
Because there's always more to do. The technology is rapidly developing and it's hard for any individual, for example, to keep on top of that. That's why we have institutes around the world that are looking at these things and collating data through teams, why we have in this country an association or a grouping of AI researchers who can share their research, that sort of thing. The government needs to show, and has already done through setting up the charter I mentioned, that it is working to keep in touch with what is happening and making the appropriate interventions where that's appropriate. One of the things that people do get worried about is the question of bias. Because when people design AI systems, they kind of almost automatically build in their own biases.
Sure.
This is where some of the people concerned about AI ethics worry about racially oriented biases or gender oriented biases being reproduced in the systems. That is where we need to be thinking about safeguards and ethical considerations. The whole area of AI ethics is a fast developing field of inquiry. I have at home, and I have to admit, have yet to work my way through an 800-page book on AI ethics. And the issue is not the size of the book, but the fact that there are so many different perspectives on it that we need to be having conversations both as citizens and as Christians about the ethical implications of the technology and where it might go. One of the examples is that if you are a human being, part of a network that includes other humans and artificially intelligent systems, where do you pin down the point of ethical accountability? And that's a tricky one. The best answer I've come up with is that it lies originally with the people who designed the systems in the first place. But my view is that we should be having conversations around these areas, because if we don't, things will happen to us rather than in some cases, having the ability to choose whether they do.
And I love the fact that you're bringing that up too, because I know, say, even for when I say modern Christians, we could even say in the last, say, 100 years or so, there's plenty of things that we've had to deal with that there is no direct biblical precedent for. You know, even if I think about online movie piracy, for example, you know, there's no Bible verse that says I can't stream a movie off an internet site. So what does this mean for us as Christians, right? So when we are thinking about this as Christians, does our faith provide a lens to this that otherwise might be missing from this conversation around AI and its place in our world?
I think it comes back to our consideration of what it means for us not only to be Christian, but also to be human. God created human beings with spirit, soul and body. He didn't create a robot, self-evidently. So the rise of AI and debates around actually what intelligence means, which is a philosophical area that we don't have time to talk about, causes us, or should I would suggest, cause us to think about what does it mean for us to be human, what does it mean for us to be people of faith in an environment where some people who do not have faith are putting their trust in the machines, in the systems. There are some people who would say, well, when we get to the point where machines are smarter than humans, then we'll begin to solve problems like world hunger and poverty and all the rest of it. I'm not one of those people.
Okay.
I believe that artificial intelligence and all that goes with it, the related technologies, are no surprise to God.
Actually, even as you say that, it makes me think there might be an opportunity here that could be quite confronting in a positive sense for us. That often, you know, we human beings struggle with, we believe one thing, but we do something else entirely. And as people have identified with AI, well, if you tell the machine one thing, it will do exactly in line with that.
Yeah.
In some ways, it might even reveal to us our own double standards when we say, well, this is important to me. And then the AI is saying, but you want me to do this as well. These things don't match up. We're maybe left going, oh, maybe that says something more about us than we're prepared to acknowledge.
So this is where there can be an inherent challenge to the way that we think about the actions that we take and the the roots of those actions without getting too sort of metaphysical about it at the moment.
Yeah.
What is our, let me put it another way, do we take seriously the fact that God in every respect created us in his image? And his image obviously has to do with, apart from anything else, the choices that we make. Do we choose to download an app that we know is going to pass some of our data to a company or an organisation that we really don't know much about at all? So there is an inherent, a built-in challenge in all of these things that I think we should be ready to accept, rather than letting this stuff happen to us.
Yeah.
Let's think about it, think it through. And this to me is something that your average Kiwi Christian sitting in church on a Sunday morning or going to a life group should be prepared to consider. Not with the aim of becoming some kind of expert, but with the aim of thinking about these technical developments as an element of the way our society is developing.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? What could that mean for my kids, my grandkids, the future of the world?
Well, you make me think of, say, like the sustainability discussion we've had over the last little while, that this could be maybe the next step in this kind of thing. We've become more mindful of, if I buy product X from shop Y, what are the downstream implications of that, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's, in your mind, maybe a similar kind of thing to get a perspective on.
Well, clearly the technology has pluses, like being able to identify health risks very, very quickly, and often more accurately than a human doctor could do. But then the clinical decisions flowing from that still need to be made by the doctors. It's like, can we use these technologies to assess what's happening in our physical environment, bringing up the area of sustainability? And of course we can. But policy decisions flowing from those analyses need to be made by us humans.
And I mean, you talked about too the security dimensions of this as well. Earlier, was saying about, like, with facial recognition and these sorts of things. In many ways, it feels like maybe the horse is bolted on this kind of stuff. This technology is out there. Well, I mean, is there something that we can do about it ourselves as individuals in terms of our interactions with maybe how our data is being gathered, or raising our concerns about this sort of thing? How might this be affecting us?
I think where organisations are asking for our data and asking for the permission to store it, as happens in a number of cases, we have a choice to make. Do we want what the organisation concerned offers enough to give them permission to store our data and use it for maybe other purposes, whether those other purposes are marketing or for demographic analyses, those sorts of things. So there are benefits, there are risks, as we've discussed. In that, you mentioned the word security, and it made me think about another area which has to do with what's called autonomous weapons, where you can have, in some people's thinking, a drone, for example, equipped with missiles, which spots a target, something that's been identified as a suitable target, and makes its own decision to fire the missile without any human intervention.
Right.
That is a pretty scary scenario, but very scary scenario, we might say. But one that I think is coming closer as we look at unexpected conflicts like the one happening right now in Eastern Europe. Could we get to the stage where people say, well, enough of soldiers sitting in darkened rooms somewhere pressing a button to make the missile fire, let's just let the system take over. We as Christians as well as citizens ought to be able to have a voice in those discussions as well, because they tap into not only the ethics of AI, but also the morality of, or otherwise, of involvement in different conflicts that we see happening around us.
It actually does speak to a bit of a challenge, I suppose, too, in how these things are interconnected, because it seems like the orders of cause and effect could be separated one or two levels now, right? From, for example, it's one thing to be the person who presses the button for, X to happen, but instead to say, well, I've actually set in order 1, 2, 3, 4, so that if I make a choice here, maybe I am still responsible, even though the outward effect of what I've chosen all the way back here is, 3, 4, 5 steps removed from what I've chosen at the beginning of a process.
And in the past, we've seen that an argument that says, I was only doing what I was ordered to do,
Right, yeah.
hasn't worked. That's known as the Nuremberg Defense, and that's what Nazi war criminals relied on in their trials after World War II. So it is possible with the technologies to have that kind of separation. If in my scenario, a drone with a missile is making its own decision. But again, we can track back to who programmed the drone to make that decision on its own. And if, to carry on the discussion, a drone makes a decision, that guy looks like, tick, 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 tick in its computerized brain, looks like the person I've been sent to destroy. Does that drone's programming also include the fact that there may be women and children in the area where that person of interest is located? What about them?
Well, and to, I suppose, bring it into a more maybe directly relevant thing for those of us who could be watching this conversation right now, there's potential, say, in a medical context where a scan comes through, and if the following boxes are ticked, you do or do not progress with treatment, or what do I do next, right? Is that
Correct.
That's the same kind of discussion?
Now, we know about things like laser eye surgery, but what if you're lying on the operating table and the doctor says, well, just bring the robot over to make the cut?
Right.
So some of us may have some qualms about that.
Sure.
Whereas, technically speaking, the robot may make a more accurate cut than the doctor might. So, whole lot of stuff swirling around us. And one thing I think it's important to emphasise is that we shouldn't be frightened, as Christians in particular, by these technologies. We should make a clear-minded assessment of what's going on and its potential implications, negative and positive, and be prepared to make informed choices. Not in terms of the detail, but in terms of a broad perspective on what's going on and what it might mean. And I think it's important for pastors, ministers, church leaders to encourage the people that they're responsible for to be thinking about these sorts of issues, as well, of course, as many others that we face, ranging from conflict overseas in which we're involved, to the climate crisis and all the rest.
Sure.
This is a whole field that we shouldn't be afraid to confront and consider.
I mean, I love the fact that we're at least starting with that today too. So I feel like I could talk about this for a long time, but in the last, say, couple of minutes that we have then, do you have a snapshot thought of where this could be heading, say, in the next 5 years or so?
I think in the next 5 years we'll see a growing multiplication of AI-driven implementations. And with each of those that touches on our lives, whether it's in an operating theatre or are we going to get the latest phone with an improved AI system in it, we need to be prepared to think about what are the implications of the choices that we're making. As Christians, we shouldn't be frightened by what we see in the movies, as we talked about at the beginning, about the rise of the robots coming to take over. Last time I read the end of Revelation, God was still in control, and he remains in control. We've no cause for fear, but we have cause to have an open-eyed view of what's going on.
Brilliant. Well, look, I really appreciate the fact you've taken some time to have a chat with us about this today. No doubt we'll have more opportunities for this in future, I think, too. AI is not going anywhere.
It definitely isn't, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. We watch Shine at home.
Well, of course you do. It's what all the cool kids are doing. And thank you for choosing to watch Shine today as well. It's been an absolute pleasure for you to be a part of this conversation with us. Enjoy your evening.